As a Jew, I am well aware that the history of Ukraine and the Jews, like the history of Russia and the Jews, like the history of Poland and the Jews, like the history of France and the Jews, has not always been a story of love and roses, of course. It has its part of darkness. But Andrey Sheptytsky is more than a bridge. He's a bond. He's a bond of flesh, of soul, of life, and of hope between the Jews and Ukraine. There are other bonds between the Jews and Ukraine. The president of Ukraine today, Volodymyr Zelensky, is one of these bonds. He is a Jew. His family paid a huge price to the Holocaust. And he is the best elected president, not only in Ukraine, but in the West. Those who conceived and built the Babi Yar Memorial, which I had the honor to inaugurate in 2016 in the name of the President of France, are also the embodiment of this bond between Jews and Ukraine. By the way, the veterans of the Israeli army, who are fighting at this very moment on the soil of Ukraine, you have some, even a lot. I know them. I share time with them. I think them are another bond. Anatoly Shapiro, the Ukrainian man who was the first one to enter in Auschwitz and to liberate Auschwitz, Anatoly Shapiro, who was in a Red Army tank, member of the first Ukrainian front, and who was the one who liberated Auschwitz, is another bond between the Jewish people and the Ukrainian people, and between the Ukrainian Jews and the non-Jewish Ukrainians. But of course, Andrey Sheptytsky, among all those names, is certainly the most saint, and for me, the one whose memory is the most holy, I would say. I visited the St. George Cathedral in Lviv, where he did hide in the caves, as well as in his own home, just in front, across the street of the cathedral. Hundreds, maybe thousands of Jews. For sure, hundreds of Jewish children and dozens of rabbis. This Metropolitan who wrote to the Pope, Pie XII, in November 1942, this letter, and then this apostolic letter sent to Urbi et Orbi in the world, named "Thou Will Not Kill," which was directly addressed to the Nazis, who was directly addressed to the world, who was so reluctant to recognize the extent of the crime. This Metropolitan, for me, is an example, of course, of bravery, of spiritual dignity, but also of this unbreakable bond, in spite of the darkness, between Ukraine and the Jews, between Ukraine and her Jews. A few days ago, and not only from Ukraine, but from front line. I was in Donetsk, where I saw the Ukrainian army counter-attacking and retaking some of the neighborhoods, some parts of the city, which the Russian army claimed to have taken control of. I was in Pokrovsk, embedded with the 155th Battalion of the Ukrainian Army, very dear to the heart of a Frenchman because it was trained, by the way, by France, in part, and I was in Sumy. In these three cities, Donetsk, retaken by Ukraine, Pokrovsk, when the Ukrainian army is not in a defensive position these days, but offensive position. And Sumy, which was the victim of this rather unprecedented tragedy 2 weeks ago. In Sumy, the Ukrainian army is protecting the city. Not always, of course. We saw that, this terrible missile strike. The days I was there, one of the days I was there, there was 95 missiles and drones falling on the area. Nevertheless, Ukrainian army stands so firmly that it allows the city of Sumy to live, and to live in a relatively normal way. Donetsk is, part of it is destroyed. Pokrovsk is a ghost city, but Sumy is a living city continuing to live a normal life of a great metropole. This is due to the Ukrainian army, and what I want to say in this place, in the Congress of America, is that the army of Ukraine is not losing the war. The army of Ukraine, the army of Ukraine, Mr. Congressman, this is what I want to be witness of. This is what I beg you to convey outside of this place, and in this place is an army of winners. They are not in the Donetsk area, in the Sumy area, in Pokrovsk area of this fight. The second observation which I did in the recent days, is that on front line, I was sometimes under heavy shelling. Sometimes it was nightmare. It was nightmare because if you counted well, you could count that when the Ukrainian army did shoot one missile or bullet or whatever, the Russian army did shoot 10. 1 against 10. When you listen to the commanders with whom I shared part of my time, Ukrainian army did fight with 1 man against 5 or 6 on the other side. 5 or 6 Assyrians, Russians, North Koreans. On the other side, you have, against 5, you had 1. Why did Ukrainian army prevail? Why does she resist? Why did she retake Donetsk? Why does the Ukrainian army still defend Sumy? Because Ukrainian army is incredibly today professional. Because the Ukrainian army is today the best in Europe, that's sure, and probably one of the best in the world. When you are able, 1 against 5, One bullet against 10. When you are able to hold the front, it means that you replace the number by the wisdom, by the sense of tactic and of practice. This is what it is a model for the West. The President of the United States recently wondered, let's say it this way, why President Zelensky did not say more often thank you, which was, by the way, an ill-informed observation, because President Zelensky says thank you as often as he thinks and as he has to say. He said thank you all the time, but the point is not that one. When I see the Ukrainian army defending their borders and our borders, when I see the Ukrainian commanders ask why they combat, replying, we combat because we defend our home, but we combat also because we defend your borders and your home, my conclusion is that it is us Europeans, it is us Americans who should say thank you to the Ukrainian but who is probably the most respectable chief of state in the Western world today. This is my second remark, and I would like to end with the last remark. I just alluded to this moment in the Oval Office, which was so embarrassing for a lot of us, if not all of us. It happens that I lived at this moment. I was not in France. I was not in America. When this moment happened, when this encounter between the two presidents, President of the United States, President of Ukraine, happened, I was in Ukraine. And I was on front line. I was in Pokrovsk. I was with some of the soldiers of the army which I just told you about. And it was a very strange and terrible moment. I was with a group of soldiers who expected this moment, who waited for it, who hoped for it. We were waiting 2 hours before in a bunker, buried in a deep bunker for this encounter. We had captured the Starlink connection, and we, all of us, connected computers to be sure not to miss any drop or any minute, any second of this blessed moment. It was so important. President of America. And we were there, underground, in this bunker, around our computers. And when the moment happened, I saw the soldiers with whom I was, tough guys, aged soldiers, not teenagers. They were 40, 50. They had a great experience of life and of war. All of them paid a high price to this war. And I saw them. During this moment, I saw them crying. In front of this image, I saw these tough men crying. And why did they cry? Because they did not expect that. Because they had such an admiration for America. Because America was their fatherland of hearts. Because they had a fatherland which is Ukraine. in flesh and blood, but in spirit. They had another fatherland, which was Europe, the free world in general. And they had such an admiration for the American dream and for the American state. And for them, it was more, it felt, it smelled, not exactly a betrayal, because it can be repaired, of course, and I hope it will be. My last word, I never understood very well why Andrey Sheptytsky, Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky, is not yet counted among the righteous among nations. I know that the case has been examined. I know that for the moment it has been put aside. But I know that those who judge at Yad Vashem, there is a long process. There can be a rejection and an appeal. It's a process. And what I want to tell you today, that now, strong of this medal, emboldened by the great honor you offer me today, I will fight for the entry of Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky